I have to admit, I didn't enjoy the Earl Sweatshirt albums all that much. The 2015 release didn't make a huge impression on me. Yet, I listened to the 2018 Some Rap Songs. I know Noel Oakeshott would champion it. I agree, at only 25 minutes of my time, it was easy to motivate myself to experience one of the more interesting and audaciously experimental mainstream hip hop releases. You could say of the 2010s, but really, all things considered, in history. Incredibly interesting release. It's almost as though Fred Frith or one of these other strange characters. It's like experimental post punk of hip hop, of 2010s kind of trap inspired hip hop. It's fascinating. I'm going to read out a little about Earl Sweatshirt for those who are not aware. He's not. That's not his birth name. Phoebe Neruda Kgositsile. Excuse me if I'm butchering that. Born February 24th, 1994, also known by his stage name Earl Sweatshirt, is an American rapper, songwriter, and record producer. Kgositsile was originally known by the moniker Sly Tendencies. I might just refer to him as Sweatshirt from now on, you'll have to forgive me. When he began rapping in 2008, but soon changed his name when Tyler, the Creator, invited him to join his alternative hip-hop collective Odd Future in late 2009. He gained recognition and critical praise for his debut mixtape, Earl, which he released in March 2010 at the young age of 16. Shortly after its release, his mother sent him to a boarding school in Samoa for at-risk teens for a year and a half. He was unable to record music during his tenure there, but returned to Los Angeles in February 2012, just before his 18th birthday. He rejoined Odd Future and started producing new music, releasing his debut studio album, Doris, in August 2013. His second album, I Don't Like Shit, I Don't Go Outside, followed in March 2015, and his third, Some Rap Songs, released in November 2018. His projects have all received widespread critical praise. The one I really like is the 2018 release. He is currently signed to his independent label Tan Cressida, which is formerly distributed by Columbia Records. On November 1st, 2019, he released an EP titled Feet of Clay. Earl released a deluxe version of Feet of Clay a few months later and then took a year off from music to start working on his next album. Late 2021, Earl released the single 2010 and then released two more singles before releasing his fourth studio album, Sick. Sick is probably my second favourite of his releases, but I didn't love it personally. Actually, you know what? I would say his second and third best releases are, in fact, not only the aforementioned Feet of Clay EP, but the other EP, what's that called? The Solace EP, I believe that's called. Yeah, they're both very good, actually. But now I'd like to read aloud the reviews of Some Rap Songs. Really, these reviews were published on Rate Your Music on the day that this album came out, or rather the month. This was released in November 2018, and specifically, just for clarification, 30th of November 2018, and we're going to be reading out some reviews around the date that this album was released. Fat One Brown Girl, on November 29th, 2018, has written, Earl Sweatshirt proved himself to be one of the most interesting personalities in hip-hop with I Don't Like Shit, I Don't Go Outside, a quite introspective album that painted a vivid portrait of Earl's struggles with mental health and isolation. With Some Rap Songs, Earl has done it again, developing on the more sound collage-esque aspects of Solace, with inspiration from acts like New York rapper Mike, to make an album that's far more complex and thematically dense than its simple title would imply. Across 15 brief tracks, Earl delivers a scattered meditation on fame, mental health, heritage, legacy, and the way all of the above have intersected across his career, ever since he was unwittingly thrust into the limelight at the age of 16. Its short runtime means that there's no time wasted as Earl Sweatshirt delivers some of his most direct and cutting lyricism atop some of the most experimental and discombobulated instrumentals he's ever been on. While many musicians who've been thrust into the limelight in the manner Earl was tend to sink under expectations, Earl's managed to continue to stay compelling by evolving as the years have passed, and the results are some of the most compelling and unique music in hip-hop. I would agree wholeheartedly. And I'd also like to read out this review here. No guitars allowed. November 30th, 2018. Please nobody pinch me out this dream. For many artists, recording an album is an innately emotional process, a tangible document of their mental state at the time. This couldn't be truer for Earl Sweatshirt, whose promising start with rap collective Odd Future was cut short by 2 years at a Samoan boarding school. Debut album Doris, released after Earl's return, boiled down his youthful anger into something much darker. This sacrifice of aggression for atmosphere would be taken further still on the bluntly titled I Don't Like Shit, I Don't Go Outside, a release dominated by themes of depression and drug abuse, with crushing verses to match. The 10-minute Solace EP was a final footnote, Earl wading through endless melancholy provoked by the death of his grandmother. If Earl's discography is like diving into a black lake, then Some Rap Songs is the bottom. At just 25 minutes long, Some Rap Songs follows a recent trend of bite-sized hip-hop albums, though I'm willing to believe this relation is purely coincidental, as Earl's vision here is a million miles away from anything Kanye West is doing. Verses start and end without warning, choruses are practically non-existent, and most beats consist of nothing more than a roughly chopped loop. Many of these tracks feel more like entries in a diary than fleshed-out songs, a sentiment entirely echoed by Earl's lyrics. But perhaps more interesting than his lyrics is the record's production. Some Rap Song sounds akin to a faded Polaroid, detail-aged and obscured. It might seem contradictory burying one of this generation's best lyricists beneath layers of grainy texture, but the effect it has on Earl's sound is immense. The mint is deeply sentimental, nowhere to go, all-encompassing and bittersweet. These samples carry an inherent emotional weight that's remarkably affecting. When Earl's voice is buried in the mix, the subtleties in his delivery are amplified by their surroundings. As a result, these brief tracks hold real depth, gradually revealing themselves through repeated listens. Naturally, Earl's knack for poetic intimacy plays a large part in this. While these verses may come off as unfinished sketches, there are several lyrical threads which help connect the dots. I get a sense he's embracing being lost, repeating, "Please, nobody pinch me out this dream," on opener shattered dreams, and accepting an unknown future in lead single Nowhere to Go. Then there's the concept of death, a topic Earl has repeatedly revisited throughout his work. Here, however, it might be more pertinent than ever before, as the last three tracks address the passing of his father. To call Playing Possum an interlude would be a disservice. The cut interlaces speeches from Earl's parents in harrowing juxtaposition. It was intended to be the album's closer, yet his father never had the chance to hear it. I don't usually like to dwell on context, but in this case it's impossible not to, especially considering the songs which follow. Peanut sees Earl at his most vulnerable and desolate, struggling to deliver a verse over gut-wrenching production. Lines like "peeking out his grave couldn't help but feel out of place" are almost unbearable to listen to, considering the apparent pain in his vocals. Closer, Riot tributes Earl's uncle and African jazz musician Hugh Masekela, who passed 2 weeks later. The instrumental is joyous in a vacuum, but inexorably soured by its place in the album. At the beginning of this review, I mentioned how albums can document an artist's mental state. Some Rap Songs epitomizes that. Over 15 tracks, Earl paints a complex and multifaceted self-portrait that frames his early work as shallow in comparison. It's one of those albums you regret reviewing within a week or even a month because there's so much I'm yet to uncover. It's sure to alienate many on first listen, but those who persevere will find a release that's remarkably honest and human. No hip-hop fan should miss this album. Some Rap Songs is proof of what's possible within the genre, one of its most unique releases in years. I'd also like to share Bob Wilson from November 30th, 2018, the same day. Remedial words whistle through the cuts of these beats as the mangled guitar chords and melted drum loops drown them out from recognition, and I think it really just adds to the atmosphere of a man jaded beyond his years. Lost in repetitively fleeting thoughts that you can't be bothered with fit in short track lengths. The opening stretch of this record is reminiscent of some of the highest peaks of hip-hop canon production-wise, and it wears the influences of Madlib, Dilla, and his contemporaries such as Knowledge on its sleeves lightly. It takes the energy and nuance of 60s soul and jazz, yet Earl stands in a juxtaposition within his cadence, as he's as audible as a corpse. Really seems every word on here is methodically placed, though. The syllables reflect each other, all seemingly unstressed, within context riddled with the lucid dreams of a man who reeks of backwoods, playing 2K on the couch in his boxers. One of my favourite verses, rhythmically speaking, is on the bends. Really, some of the most concise poetry is assembled on this release, even though he doesn't go out of his way to sound profound in any way. He doesn't really go out of his way to sound much like of anything. There's a point on the second half of the album, starting with the very personal recordings on Playing Possum, that I feel are unfortunately a little out of place, and the tracks after it I really can't feel much for, especially Riot, which is just a down-tempo plunderphonics cut. Now known, it's a rather obscure Masekela track, the Uncle Hugh homage went right over my head, which is nice but seems a step down from the rest of the track list. I still don't really like Sage's feature on the mint, still sadly, and there's a couple tracks on here that compositionally don't stand even among the peaks. By peaks, I mean instrumental hip-hop nirvana of its duration, even though Earl's lyricism stays just as dense, dysphoric, and stumbling for the entirety of the listen, and displays a masterclass showing of sophisticated mediocrity in a man already cemented in hip-hop's canon. And we're going to read out a couple of more. From Le Potion Master, Earl's distinct droning voice peppers poetic rhymes across walls of expertly arranged looping beats and jazz undercurrents to create an atmospheric masterpiece on some rap songs. SRS is an absorbing showcase of Earl's idiosyncratic style, a style which we've caught glimpses of before in previous albums, but never to this extent. In his third studio album, he leaves convention behind entirely in pursuit of his own authentic sound. A palpable sense of disillusionment haunts the listener throughout SRS as we follow Earl's voice emerging from and receding into enchanting looping beats. We're given fleeting insights into the artist's thought processes he skirts around topics such as death and grief, managing to avoid fixation and over-explanation. He expertly demonstrates subtlety and intellect in dealing with his profound struggles, refusing to romanticize or succumb to defeat. Despite the, for the most part, melancholy subject matter of SRS, Earl still exudes a sense of defiance in the face of his struggles. On December 24th, Earl ponders death with an air of indifference. That's just how it is. You die and then you live, huh? One can't help but admire such a rational acceptance of his and all of humanity's fate, particularly in light of his recent misfortunes. Such thought-provoking deliberations, devoid of self-pity and anger, are to be found throughout the 15 tracks. The highlight of the album for me is the ambient Peanut, a poignant deliberation on depression, his moving words softened and masked by the universally familiar sound of heavy rainfall. SRS can sound disconnected and erratic at times, but for me this perceived lack of cohesion only helps to create an atmosphere of confusion and turmoil, an atmosphere which must be heavily surrounding Earl and his conscience in the wake of his father's loss. In my view, his lyrical expertise is unparalleled in the modern rap game, and on SRS he manages to commandeer an authentic, confessional style through a myriad of fascinating, insightful contemplations. An incredible album and his most complex, moving, and mature project yet. And finally, let's read out Legends Will Never Die, who states this is album of the year. Earl Sweatshirt is a 24-year-old MC and producer from Los Angeles, California, who began his career in 2008 under the name Sly Tendencies. He posted a handful of tracks for a mixtape called Kitchen Cutlery on MySpace, but the tape would never be released to this day. Then he formed a rap trio with two of his friends called the Backpackers, and planned to release a mixtape together titled World Playground, but they disbanded sometime in 2009, shortly after he joined Odd Future and appeared on their second and final mixtape, Radical, that May. 10 months later, he put out his only mixtape to date, Earl, with Odd Future's de facto leader, Tyler the Creator, producing a bulk of it. The tape received a lot of buzz, but Earl's mother would send him to a therapeutic retreat school for at-risk boys in Samoa sometime after until February of 2012. He was then granted his own Columbia Records imprint, Tan Cressida Records, and released his debut album Doris in 2013 to critical acclaim for his clever rhyme schemes and the gritty production from those such as the Neptunes and even the RZA. He then formed the duo Hog Slaughter Boys with Odd Future affiliate Narkel at the beginning of 2015 and released his sophomore album I Don't Like Shit, I Don't Go Outside a couple months after. Many of which consider to be better than Doris for its darker aesthetic. He's been laying low since then, but with the deaths of his father, Keorapetse, Kgositsile, I butchered that, as well as his uncle Hugh Maskela and his father and his friend Mac Miller earlier this year, he's putting out his highly anticipated third album. The album begins with Shattered Dreams, where Earl discusses his comeback over a soul sample. The next track, Redwater, serves as a short, yet equally gratifying sequel to Solace, while the song Cold Summers uses some clever gun imagery over a mellow instrumental. The track Nowhere to Go talks about depression over a glitchy abstract instrumental, while the song December 24 gets intellectually conscious over a Denmark Vassie instrumental with a prominently gloomy piano sample. The track On the Way talks about his mood swinging over a smooth guitar sample, while The Mint with Navy Blue sees the two talking about fighting their demons over an amazing piano loop. The Benz touches down on his success over a soul sample and some strings, while the song Loosie seems to talk about a backstabber over a slow yet funky beat. The track Azucar talks about how he's been coping with his depression over a blissful instrumental, while the song Eclipse is about him missing his shine. The track Veins talks about keeping faith over an amazing Curtis Mayfield sample, and after the heartwarming Playing Possum interlude from Earl's parents, the penultimate track Peanut discusses the deaths of Keorapetse and Hugh over a subtle yet dark beat. The album ends with Riot, which is an instrumental cut heavily sampling the Hugh Masekela song with the same name. This has been one of my most anticipated albums of 2018, and at the end, Earl has just given what I believe to be the best album I've heard all year. I was hoping it'd be a bit longer, much like his last album was, but the Mad Villainy influenced production is super creative, and Earl continues to prove himself as the second best lyricist of the decade, number one, of course, being Kendrick Lamar. I don't get the Kendrick Lamar thing is bunk. This just comes across as it's someone with meaningful and fair politics and beats that just sound like a throwback to 90s tropes that, I don't know, it just sounds like music for posers to me. I don't care for the Kendrick Lamar thing. I feel like he's just plagiarizing better older artists that people don't listen to anymore, to be honest. Lyrically and musically, it's just safe. It's just always been safe, by cleverly detailing the darkest year of his life. Anyway, just as I've expressed some controversial opinions about the most acclaimed artist on Rate Your Music right now, we'll end it here. Thanks again, my friends.